All right, everybody. Just so you all know, the recording is started, and allow me to introduce Mr. Ron Cook first, and then I'll turn over the controls to him. In this evening's session, Mr. Ron Cook will speak on the impacts that emerging technologies have on your industry. Whether your focus is on music and recording, games, art and design, film and television, technology, media and communication, business, or sports, each of these areas focuses on technology and is impacted significantly by these emerging technologies. Therefore, we will explore how some of these technologies will affect your careers. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Ron Cook. Ron has his PhD in psychology from California Coast University and is the CEO and co-founder of Districts Incorporated, a mobile marketing platform designed for Main Street shopping districts across the country. This platform allows visitors to a Main Street area to receive a map with pins for attractions, parking, events, and more. You may check out the Districts mobile app and website at Districts. I'll spell that for you. It's distrx.com. Join me in welcoming Mr. Ron Cook. Thank you, Ron, for being with us this evening. All right, Ron, I'm going to turn over the controls to you. I'm going to make you the presenter.
Okay, let's just verify that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great, cool. Well, thanks for joining us again, and I appreciate you guys allocating some time for me this evening. I thought a good place to start, since we're talking about emerging technologies, would be to drop back a few years. And, well, why don't we drop all the way back? In fact, let's drop back about 4 billion years. If I can start this here. Hang on a second. There we go. I'm going to drop back 4 billion years where there really wasn't any technology, obviously. And what we're looking at now is just that whole primordial soup, that whirling, swirling collection of gases from which eventually sprang life. If you're wondering what that has to do with what we're about to talk about, ever since these organisms started to develop and multiply, they started to evolve. And those that succeeded, those that prospered, those that made the right kind of adaptations over the years, they're still around today. And obviously those that didn't aren't. So I thought an appropriate way to look at this as a metaphor to technology is to look at the evolution of technology, because I know we would all agree that our technologies across the board have evolved, certainly over the last several hundred years. They're evolving now, and they will continue to evolve in the future. So what we're going to be talking about this evening is a few of the technologies that typically impact entertainment type companies and the impact they may have on you and your future career, as you heard in the introduction. So I won't bore you with the details of my background, and you already heard a little bit of it in the introduction, but I currently work in what's loosely referred to as the Internet of Things space with a mobile technology company. And we use some technology from Apple called iBeacon to help communicate information on a proximity basis. So it's proximity-based information delivery. Just to kind of give you a quick idea. If you have any questions, hopefully we'll have some time at the end. I thought I would save you the trouble of asking the question by going ahead and answering it, because I get this all the time. And that's simply this. Yes, you can have the slides. And as you already heard Mr. Cosson say, it's being recorded as well, so you'll be able to go back and take a look at the recorded session. But for those of you interested in the slides, all you have to do is send me an email. And you just heard the spelling of the company name, DISTRX. So it's ron@districts.com. The subject of the email is slides. Whatever you do, don't put in the subject line, "Hey, Ron, please send me your slides," just the word slides. Then in the body of the email, you can put whatever you want. Enjoyed the session, you suck, whatever you want to say, that's fine. But if the subject is slides, I promise you, you'll get the slides instantly. It'll be in a PDF form, so you won't get the benefit of some of the video clips we're going to be using this evening, but you'll definitely get the slides. Okay, with that said, what I thought we would do this evening is such a broad topic. The whole issue of emerging technologies, there are thousands of them. One could argue an infinite number of them. So I picked out some that I think directly impact our respective industries, and I'll just go through them real quickly here. I consider myself fairly knowledgeable about mobile technology, since that's what we do, and things are changing in the mobile space. So we'll talk a little bit about that. E-commerce, that's changed just a little bit over the last 10 to 15 years or so. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence because that's definitely the path to the future. And it's both exciting and a little bit scary. So we'll talk a little bit about how that may impact all of us. We'll look at the Internet of Things and big data and how we can use the collection of all that data from all those billions of sensors and devices to use predictive analytics to maybe be a little bit more exact about predicting the future. I put drones and robotics together. Obviously, any of these topics could fill an hour lecture anywhere at any time, or multiple sessions. But I put them together because of the way they're used in some of the things that some of us do, like filmmaking and those kinds of things. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about virtual reality and augmented reality. There's been some really cool advances that I'm sure you're well aware of over the last few years. We want to talk about the implications of those technologies as we go forward. So in typical Full Sail style, we're going to cover a lot of ground in a fairly short period of time. So hold on to your hats. We're going to jump right in, and we'll start with mobile technology. As I mentioned, I work in that space. We develop mobile apps, and specifically a mobile app with a very specific niche play for shopping and entertainment communities around the country. So I think I have a pretty good handle on that space. And if we look at continuing that same metaphor about evolution, if we look at the evolution of mobile, obviously, it seems like we've progressed, or some would argue regressed, when now we have this powerful processor in the palm of our hands. If you're an educator, as I used to be, it's both good and bad. If you're sitting there wondering, well, why do I need to learn all this stuff if I have a device in the palm of my hand that can give me all that information anytime I want it? But just like all the other technologies, mobile technology has progressed pretty quickly. In the future, obviously, we're looking at things like 5G in terms of connectivity. We're looking at improvements in devices every single year. New devices come out. So we want to make sure that we stay on top of that. But the bottom line is, as we already know, we're all connected. We live in a connected world. The fact that, in essence, instead of the graying of the world is actually getting younger. And right now, while we're on this session, more than half of the population on our planet is less than 30 years old. And having said that, we know that the younger you are, the better chances are that you are a digital native, or you are growing up with mobile technology. It's something you've known, ever since you could pick up a smartphone for the first time. So knowing that, we need to know how to take advantage of that technology and leverage it. And here we're talking about your perspective on how you would use that technology to reach potential customers for whatever it is that you're doing within your particular industry. So again, looking at this from your perspective, there's a continued migration to mobile. The use of mobile devices has just grown exponentially. It continues to grow. We'll touch on that in a second. But as it's grown, consumer behavior has changed. And the essence of it is, gee, if I now have all this processing power, I can get information anywhere I want it, anytime I want it, then I don't need to do as much advanced planning if I can be in a location and access that information right then, right there. We've got 5G coming. We'll talk more about what that means in just a second, but it's pretty exciting because we're going to make the next exponential jump forward in terms of connectivity, processing power, and so on. We'll talk a little bit about, and this impacts all of us really, about why we've been so reluctant and so slow in the US to adopt mobile wallet and being able to conduct transactions using our phones. Other nations have adopted it much more quickly than the US. We'll talk about why that is, implications for the future. And then finally there on the mobile side, we'll look a little bit about mobile gaming, because that is a very exciting part of gaming going forward, and the advances in connectivity are only going to power that accelerated pace. So let's talk a little bit about this. This is the year where everything really changed, and it changed in this 4 years ago, where all of a sudden people are using mobile devices to look for information more than desktops. Now for you, that may be a given, but for those of us that grew up with desktops and then started adopting mobile technology rather than vice versa, it's a pretty big deal. It's such a big deal, in fact, that Google has now changed their search algorithm based simply on that fact. And we'll talk more about how that works and the implications of it in a second. Nowadays, when we're accessing information on a mobile device, we're looking for information. We end up with some search results, which is hopefully what we want, whether we did voice search or type something in. We're looking for information, we get the results, we select something, and when we do that, Google refers to these as micro moments, because by definition, when we accept something and select something, we're rejecting the other alternatives. And then rejecting the other alternatives, if we pick the first thing on the page that came up in the search results, and your company, your entertainment company, was third or fourth or fifth on the list, or God forbid on the next page, where you might as well not even exist, nobody is going to find you, because that micro moment has made that decision. What consumers are trying to do these days are conduct more research. And I mentioned that it doesn't necessarily have to be days in advance. It could be on the spot, on an impulse, where I'm interested in something, I heard about something, I pull out my phone, I want to check it, and I want to do a little bit of research. And now I can do that on the fly. But considering those micro moments again, I'm rejecting most of the information, trying to land on what I'm actually looking for. And Google now refers to that behavior, which I'm sure you're pretty familiar with, because it probably happens to you, very simply as know, go, do, and buy. So simply stated, I want to understand a product or service. I want to do some research about it. I want to go see it and experience it. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily in a retail store. That could be on a website. I could just sort of check it out. Doing it means I could actually touch it if I'm in a physical location, or I could look at images of it, experience it, see a demo, look at a video on YouTube, or otherwise I could sort of experience what it does. And the minute I'm convinced that it's what I want, then I can go ahead and make a purchase decision. And those of you that probably do what I do, a lot of people might be researching things online. They may want to physically go and see it. We call that showrooming, where we're going to look at that next big, 8K TV, and we're going to go to Best Buy to check it out and see if it's as good as they say. And then we're still going to turn around as we walk out of the store on our phone and order it from Amazon, have it delivered the next day. Sorry, Best Buy. Sorry that didn't work out for you. So a couple of things have changed, and I mentioned that in 2015, as soon as mobile search surpassed desktop search, and since then, of course, it's only grown and grown, again, exponentially. We have to be able to make sure that whatever content we put out on the web, especially websites for companies such as you may already have, that they meet what's called the Google Mobile Friendly Test, because it's that indexing of the mobile friendly version of your website that now exclusively determines your search results. So if you've got a great looking desktop website that can't be accessed on mobile well at all, then you will not appear at the top of search engine results. Sorry, get used to it. So here's how it works. And no pun intended, you could Google mobile friendly test and you'll come up with this. But basically, very simple. We're just going to drop our URL in to this mobile friendly test. I've added the sound effect, by the way. That doesn't happen. And what Google's doing, obviously, is it's going out and searching, indexing that site to determine whether the mobile-friendly version is, in fact, mobile-friendly. Here we're looking at Full Sail, so let's see how we do. Woo, cool. So as you can see, Full Sail site is mobile-friendly, so get a little green kudo there. But by selecting issues, then Google's kind enough to now show us everything we need to do to make our site better. So it could just be that we need to take images that are high resolution and fix them for the web, but we're going to get a detailed report of that and we can take immediate action. So pretty cool. Second thing we need to worry about, which is different, we talked about being able to find our site via search based on the mobile friendliness. Now we want to consider whether our site loads fast enough so that people that want to access it will stay on it and not flip off of it because they have to wait too long for content to load. Again, here we're looking at the same type of thing. Site loading test here, just drop in a URL. We're going to see how Full Sail does in terms of site speed. So what Google's doing here, of course, is crawling the site with a mobile bot. And bingo, here comes our report. I'm going to go just down here and go ahead and look at the report. And you'll notice that in this particular case, and I anticipate that it's predominantly because of the rich media content of Full Sail's site, you notice it's running a little bit slow. But we're only talking about a few seconds, not 10 seconds or something that would cause people to clip off of it. Again, I could, in the upper right, ask for a complete report. I can make modifications and make my site load quicker. So that's the second thing. The next thing, of course, is this whole thing about 5G. So I thought we'd take a moment and look at what 5G is. So check out this quick clip.
Imagine playing a co-op shooter like Fortnite or PUBG on a VR headset in real time, with zero lag all through your phone while traveling in a fleet of self-driving cars going 200 miles an hour. Sit tight, because the future of gaming and everything else is about to change forever. And while you may be thinking that 5G is just a little faster, a little more reliable, and a little newer, it's actually a massive breakthrough that's going to change the way devices connect to the internet, and more importantly, to each other. In fact, as 5G rolls out over the next 2 years, it's going to change, well, everything with a wireless connection, which at this point is, well, pretty much everything. So what's so special about a 5G future? Well, first of all, it's fast, like really fast, like 20 gigabits per second over wireless fast, like 100 to 250 times faster than 4G. Because by comparison, 4G provides speeds on average of about 10 to 20 megabits a second. So that's like going from streaming one Netflix movie in HD to streaming 400 movies in 8K at the same time. And while that's really impressive, that's not the most impressive part. What sets 5G aside is its crazy low latency rate, which is the amount of delay between the sending and receiving of information. Now, 4G tends to average about 100 to 200 milliseconds. And to be fair, 100 milliseconds is fast. Human reaction time is about 200 to 300 milliseconds. But 5G will get it down to 1 millisecond. That's almost real time. And being able to send and receive information in what is essentially real time means that we can use 5G to replace real-time interactions. What does that mean? With 5G, you'll be able to interact with people, objects, or characters controlled by someone else with no lag on either side. So play a real-time first-person shooter on your phone. Control virtual objects with other people simultaneously. Put on a headset and fly a drone or drive a car that's somewhere else in real life. Or better yet, let it drive itself.
Cool. I thought I'd stop here just for a second and make sure maybe Kenneth, you can jump in there and make sure everybody's hearing the audio. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you just perfectly.
Okay, great. Just wanted to check and make sure. Well, remember that word latency that was just mentioned, going from 200 milliseconds to 1 millisecond with 5G. When you start to think about things like autonomous cars, self-driving cars and that kind of thing, wanting a very quick reaction. So there's a lot more to it than just the whiz-bang stuff of the speed of the connectivity. That latency factor is going to be very big in a lot of the technology that all of us use in the future.
Imagine playing a
Oops, there we go. Sorry about that.
shooter like Fortnite or
see if we can move forward there. There we go. So if you're wondering what's happening with 5G, and I found these statistics just before the session today, the U.S. in many respects is a little bit behind the curve in terms of the 5G rollout. We'll talk more about why that is as we look at things like mobile wallet. But regardless, we are on the precipice of having 5G. What you'll start to see as you look at the various carriers here in terms of what they're doing, you'll start to see 5G devices come out. Most of these will be happening as we move into next year. So I'm laughing because just as you thought you don't need another phone, you don't need to continually upgrade, as I do all the time on my iPhone, you're going to do it because you're going to want to take advantage of all that 5G has to offer. So sorry, nothing I can do about that one. Let's talk about mobile wallet. And one of the questions, or one of the comments that I made was that we've been so slow to adopt that. And, why is that? And I'd tell you there's a couple of reasons. We've become, unfortunately, comfortable in our country, in our economy, because we've had sufficient advances in payment technology that we feel pretty good about being able to whip out a credit card and do something. And those of us that do feel comfortable with mobile wallets, we've adopted that methodology, but it's still very, very low in terms of a percentage of the population using mobile wallet for payment. So again, why is that? There are two predominant reasons for that. In other countries, and I'm trying to remember the one in, I think it's WePay or something in China, and they actually have WeChat Pay and a lot of different other things. Some of these countries like Japan that have, in essence, monopolies on the mobile infrastructure, you can only have one, settlement methodology, one company developing that payment processing, and that's cool. Here in our country, we've got, Apple comes up with a different one than Google, than Android, than credit card companies. Everybody wants to have their own payment methodology, and so that's slowed things down a little bit. The other thing, though, is just the reluctance of people that are pretty comfortable with the way things are today, not wanting to take the risk. So here are just a couple of comments that I grabbed from doing some research on this yet. Why change? Why should I do this if I'm pretty happy right now? Everybody knows that in the future, our phones are going to perform more transactions, but for now, I don't need cash. I've got the credit cards. I've got debit cards. I feel pretty secure with that with chip technology, so people are just a little bit more reluctant to change. Again, if we look at Generation Z compared to baby boomers, obviously much more adoption of payment technology from those folks. Finally, mobile gaming, and I think this is kind of interesting because what's happening now is there's so many different types of mobile games, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, and I'm not a big mobile gamer, so I'm clearly no expert in that field whatsoever. But I do want to show you the way that Google and others start to categorize gamers, whether you're a casual gamer, strategy, fantasy, that kind of thing. And the reason this matters, and some of the other things we're going to talk about this evening, is how we approach these people, how we sell what we have to these various demographics, these customer bases, to make sure that our product is going after the market where people are likely to buy what we have to sell. So kind of keep that in mind. As all this comes together, though, and especially with 5G connectivity, right now and in the very near future, you'll start to see things like this. So again, imagine going back to the clip on 5G, imagine virtually zero latency and the ability to play highly interactive games, potentially with an additional sensor input, wearables and that kind of thing to make the game even more realistic. And now, rather than needing other devices, we can simply do that all on our phones and other mobile devices. Pretty cool stuff. We're moving pretty quickly here in the interest of time. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one, which is one of those kind of duh moments for me. Obviously, they're emerging technologies in e-commerce, and we've seen these over the past, again, 10 or 15 years. So I wanted to hit you with a couple of things, which I thought was a little bit surprising. In 2018, the ability for people to purchase things online, actually make those purchases, is still just under 12% of total worldwide sales, which I would have thought it would have been a little bit higher than that by now. But again, this is worldwide, not in the US, where it's, I'm sure, much, much higher. But look at the site conversion rate. If somebody's going to go to a site, Amazon or in others, where there are lots of products being offered, the conversion rate of people actually making a purchase still just under 3%. So lots of upside potential there if we can provide people the results they want when they want them and tailor them to what the customer is looking for. That conversion rate will obviously go up. But smartphones accounted for 61% of retail purchases in that manner versus desktops 30%. And that desktop's going to probably continue to go down, and mobile sales obviously will continue to go up. The interesting thing for me is, and I do this, you probably do this too, if I'm in a store and I see something really cool and I'm highly interested in it, especially a big ticket item, I'm going to pull out my phone right then and there. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to do a price comparison, and I'm going to say, goodbye, Best Buy. I'm going to go and order it from Amazon. It's going to be at my house in a day. And we'll talk more about, the fact that that's literally the case now in just a second. So pretty cool stuff. So what do you think, if you had to name a company that really, really impacted this whole concept of being able to get things right here, right now, then what company would that be? And I won't even wait for the answers to pop up here, because I think we all know the answer. One of the biggest pioneers of that whole space was Amazon. And Amazon presented this marketplace, online marketplace. They sort of streamlined the transaction process, but then they added a lot of extra bells and whistles, which is still what makes them so popular today. These things, and I hope you can see this graphic, because I'm one of the guys that absolutely positively made fun of these Amazon Dash buttons that you can simply stick in your laundry room and push a button whenever you want detergent. And my reaction was, how stupid is that? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. But then what's the alternative? I can go out to my desktop or pull out a mobile device and place an order, or I could just hit a big button. So maybe it wasn't so stupid. It's interesting that this year they're starting to phase these out because they're adding some additional bells and whistles to their other ordering system, which we'll talk more about in a second. But it shows you how technology sort of, again, evolved to be able to make that purchase decision, right on the spot while I'm standing in my laundry room, realizing I'm running out of stuff. Amazon created a culture of belongings, similar to a Sam's Club or a Costco. Now we can be part of something. We can sign up for Amazon Prime, and for a fee, we can get the benefits of, expedited delivery and, free everything, and be able to find things other people can't find before they can find them, et cetera, et cetera. The one that I really love is when you just look at what's on your screen right now and ponder it for a second. We're going to be on this session for about an hour. So using Amazon Prime Now, we could have ordered a product at the start of this session, and by the time it's over, somebody's going to be ringing the doorbell, delivering that product. I think that's pretty freaking amazing. The one that drives me nuts, though, and I'm sure it drives you crazy too, is the one that they just rolled out recently, is that Amazon Before, where you actually get the product before you ever even thought about ordering it, which starts to get pretty freaky. The scary thing to me is, I'm sure that a couple of you at least are sitting there thinking, is that for real? And the answer is no. I just made that up, and now you see the extent of my graphics capabilities. But think about it. It's pretty close to that already, isn't it? But where we are right now today is that regardless of how many things we buy online, some of us are still going to want to go to a store, even if it's just to grab something, at a convenience store. And even that's changing. And Amazon, not that I'm a big fan, but in this case, they're definitely leading the way. So imagine you could just shop and then go.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store, so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter and start shopping. Just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual card automatically. So, how does it work? We use computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you find in self-driving cars. We call it Just Walk Out technology. Once you got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual card and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No, seriously.
I see some of you are commenting that something is going on with the audio, so let me stop here and just see if we can just speak at least, since we're obviously playing these video clips. They're embedded videos, so they're not using the web or anything. How is the audio? Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think it might be a bandwidth issue. Great. Okay. Well, let's keep going then, and I apologize for any technical difficulties, especially when we're talking about emerging technologies. Interesting, huh? Let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence in terms of how it's impacting us. And again, I'm going to go to another quick clip here just to explain it, just a very brief introduction, and then we'll come back and talk about how it's already impacting us.
Aside from consumer electronics, artificial intelligence's greatest promise may be in transforming entire industries. The underlying technology making this happen is known in the tech community as supervised learning.
You have humans who are able to provide the training data for algorithms to then automate a task. So for example, a self-driving car knows how to avoid a pedestrian, knows how to stay in the lane, because humans have sat down with images taken from the front of these cars and said, this is a human, this is the lane which marks the edge of the road. And it's these thousands and thousands of hours of human feedback which ultimately enables the self-driving car to be trained to automate this task.
Google's Waymo is on the forefront of self-driving car technology and is using supervised learning to drive it forward. But in fact, transportation is just one area that is booming in the field of artificial intelligence.
So hopefully you caught that. It's just a real quick look at this whole concept of using all this data that we're collecting to train machines, various kinds of machines, in this case using the data to power the technology to be able to discriminate between things. Another example would be in crop production, where we're out there in fields with these huge pieces of equipment that are fertilizing and watering and weed control and all those kinds of things. We can teach those machines what the plant that we're trying to grow looks like. And once it knows that, it knows those are the plants that we want to water, those are the plants we want to fertilize. We also show it what a weed looks like. Here's some examples of weeds. And when you see one of those, we don't want you to water it or fertilize it. We want you to spray it with a herbicide and kill it. So over time, we're going to be doing less watering, theoretically less fertilizing of things we shouldn't be, and we'll be killing the weeds and all those kinds of things and making everything a lot more environmentally friendly. So that's pretty cool. And that's real sexy, and there's a lot of different applications around a variety of different industries. But some of the things we're dealing with today are these allegedly smart devices. And again, I'm looking at this from your perspective. If I'm in your shoes and I want to have a career in an industry and I want to maybe have my own company, do my own thing, I'm going to suddenly be very concerned about what Google and Cortana and Siri and Alexa have to say about me and my company. Can somebody really find out information about what you do? So we all need to be very, very concerned. These things have gotten highly sophisticated. They become more sophisticated as they collect additional data. And whether you're using these devices for voice search or whatever, home automation, a lot of different things you can use them for, we want to make sure, again, that we are there and that we come up when people ask their smart speaker about whatever it is that we do. I have a bunch of these things. I'm kind of into home automation. In fact, the last thing, other than telling my wife good night, kissing her good night, she will then say, Alexa, good night, and it turns the lights out, turns on a fan. She has some music routines that she does to kind of fade us off into sleep, and that's pretty cool. But again, these things get pretty smart. So here's the one, and apologize for the audio on this one because I've jacked in the one here where I am in a home office, and let's see if it works, because here we're going to ask Alexa about what we are doing. And theoretically speaking, since she's here in this room participating in this session, directly listening to what we're doing, she should know that already. So let's try it here. Alexa, tell us about this session.
The session is entitled How Emerging Technologies Influence Your Industry. The instructor is Dr. Ron Cook.
Well, that's really cool because she has the context of the session that we're in. So let's see, again, if I'm putting myself in your shoes, you should want to know what they have to say about you. Alexa, what do you know about Dr. Ron Cook?
Ron Cook is an honors graduate of Georgia Tech and spent much of his business career in the hotel business. He left the hospitality industry to join an Atlanta-based private equity fund as CEO of one of the fund's portfolio companies. Cook spent 10 years as a course director, department chair and program director at Full Sail University. He is incredibly handsome, charming, witty, and obviously knows how to put words in my mouth. Can I please go now? I just can't take this anymore.
So obviously, cat's out of the bag. We talked about that supervised learning, so I wanted to make sure that Alexa had the benefit of learning about me. And those are called, by the way, advanced skills. Well, I don't know if you're aware of this. You can actually provide your own programming, your own supervised learning. So apologies for that brief demonstration. When I do this at conferences in particular, people kind of freak out. So, and again, she's always listening. So keep that in mind. So sorry, Alexa. What this gives rise to, though, are things that actually we do use in the real world that you are going to use in the real world. And in fact, you may have already been using without even knowing it. So here's an example of how far a Google Assistant has come.
It turns out a big part of getting things done is making a phone call. You may want to get an oil change schedule, maybe call a plumber in the middle of the week, or even schedule a haircut appointment. You know, we are working hard to help users through those moments. We want to connect users to businesses in a good way. Businesses actually rely a lot on this, but even in the US, 60% of small businesses don't have an online booking system set up. We think AI can help with this problem. So let's go back to this example. Let's say you want to ask Google to make you a haircut appointment on Tuesday between 10 and noon. What happens is the Google Assistant makes the call seamlessly in the background for you. So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a woman's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now? Okay, we have at 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
That was a real call you just heard. The amazing thing is the assistant can actually understand the nuances of conversation. We've been working on this technology for many years. It's called Google Duplex. It brings together all our investments over the years in natural language understanding, deep learning, text-to-speech. By the way, when we are done, the assistant can give you a confirmation notification saying your appointment has been taken care of.
So if you're thinking that's pretty cool, then I certainly couldn't agree more. And I could tell you that if you could look this up with Think with Google, and they'll show you a lot of different examples about just how far that artificial intelligence technology has come. The Google Assistant has become so sophisticated that even conversing with somebody in a different language, they can navigate, the Google Assistant can navigate those nuances and still produce a result very similar to what you just saw. So it's absolutely amazing, and it's still in its infancy, so you can only imagine. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, I hate these chat bots calling me up on the phone and impersonating an individual. Here's a case where we can actually use the technology for good, and obviously it can be used for evil as well. But we want to make sure that, again, if we're the ones on the accessing side, that we can find those services and take advantage of artificial technology, or excuse me, anyway, using the technology to find exactly what we want when we want it. And we want our systems to be able to direct us to the things that we most need to find and when we need to find them. Now, in terms of entertainment, it's pretty obvious to me how we can use some of this stuff. If we have all of this information, we can become much, much better marketers and advertisers. So we can actually develop film trailers and design our advertisements to reach specific markets, not just a market, a global market, a specific targeted market. We can personalize the user experience. We'll look at some examples in a second about Netflix, where we can really personalize the content to each individual user, which is really, really cool. And then we can use AI to quite literally handle parts of the production process. So let's look at what we mean by that. Whether you're dealing with pre or post-production, there are a lot of things now via artificial intelligence that can be automated, whether it's breaking down a script or storyboarding or creating a schedule, or in post, having to go through the laborious functions of syncing and grouping clips, et cetera, et cetera. Now, AI can help us do that. So it can perform a lot of those functions in the background, leaving us to do the creative side. But in the future, it's possible that AI could actually generate content. And I don't think we're going to trust it right now to generate content that's as creative as humans can do, but in the future that could change. So we simply need to be aware of that. Maybe we're using it to create things that are repetitive in nature, not just really the storyline, the creative side, but those backgrounds and other things that all of us are familiar with. In music and media, artificial intelligence is used mostly for curation. And this is like when Amazon, you're buying a product and it says that people who like this may also like that. It doesn't mean if you like a particular artist and you're on a streaming service or otherwise that you're going to like everybody in that genre or every other similar artist to the one you're listening to. But it is something that can maybe hone your preferences and present things to you that you're more likely to want and more likely, of course, to buy. You're probably already aware, those of you that use Netflix, as I do, your start screen when you access Netflix is totally different than any other start screen for any other person anywhere. And it's all based on the algorithms, based upon your preferences, past preferences, and kind of predicting what you may want to see. Right now, and this is happening today, may make you a little bit nervous, there are algorithms out there that are telling executive, quote unquote, producers which are the films that are most likely to be financed. And that might not seem fair, but if you're from an investor perspective, you want to know what genres are selling. And again, here we're collecting massive amounts of data from ticket sales, from streaming sales, on demand, all the various sources. And we're able to produce all this quote unquote big data. And the financial markets obviously can see that, and they're going to be more likely to finance those things that they see are most in demand at any point in time. So it just kind of goes without saying. Which brings us to this, the whole concept of big data and the Internet of Things. Now, I told you I operate in the Internet of Things space. I'm sure you probably already know what it is, but what it is today is it's billions and billions of devices and sensors talking to each other wirelessly predominantly, and in many cases making decisions without the intervention of humans. So it could be things like you have already pre-programmed your preferences for your home thermostat, your smart thermostat, or lighting, or whatever the case may be. And these devices are collecting information, talking to each other, and they're making adjustments continuously based on what they have learned about your preferences. All those billions of devices, more than 10 billion today, headed to 20 billion and 50 billion in a few years, produce data. And we take that data, we use that data for predictive analytics to predict what people may do or want to do in the future. And that's where the future really of big data is. If we look at the entertainment industry in particular, some relevant examples, if we look at it for trend analysis, which is what a lot of people do, a lot of analytical folks out there, if you look at Netflix, when they made a decision years ago to do the series House of Cards, they weren't doing that in a vacuum. They were taking all of this data that came from the same series shows in the UK to say, wow, this is probably going to be a really hot commodity in the US. It mitigates our risk, but also it tells us the types of characters we should cast. Those characters in whom the viewers were most interested in the UK, we want to cast similar diabolical characters in our US version. And we also are going to be looking at the data to tell us how best to advertise it. What kind of viewer is most likely to look at that programming? And that obviously that series went on to be pretty wildly successful. If we look at making content more immersive, we can take things like games, and again, as I mentioned earlier, we can use various controls and sensors and make gaming equipment not just smarter, but more immersive and more interactive by providing sensations and making it more realistic, as we're about to talk about in virtual and augmented reality. And then since we've collected all this data, we can be highly targeted in finding our audience. We don't need to look at worldwide audiences anymore, or even national audiences. We can look at even regional audiences or audiences specific to certain genres. And we can be very, very selective about where we spend our advertising dollars. So pretty cool stuff. When I look at the IoT and big data and entertainment again, if we can use these predictive analytics to talk about what we think audiences want to see in the future, then that obviously helps us in terms of what we create. We can test, we call it predominantly A/B testing, where we're checking pricing, whether we're doing subscription services, what are people willing to pay, when do they want to see media scheduled, and so on. We can highly customize the customer interaction. As I mentioned, Netflix is a great example of that, where we can literally provide the content based upon what we know users have looked at in the future, in the past, as a way to predict the future. We can create targeted content that can be highly specialized, not necessarily to the person, but to a region or, again, a particular genre. We can target our ads to make them very much more effective. I don't know if any of you have done Facebook advertising, but it's a great way of being able to drill down to specific customer demographics and reach only the market you want to reach, very similar to the way that cable television does it, has done it for years. And we can also see, gee, if we can do this, or if we could just add that, maybe people will be willing to pay for that. And it might point us to some new sources of revenue, which is pretty cool. Let me pause here for a breath and a sip of Diet Dr. Pepper. And before we go forward, because now we're going to be combining a couple of technologies together, drones and robotics. And again, think about how you would use these technologies in your own part of the industry. Gotta love Diet Dr. Pepper. Love it, love it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about drones first. The interesting thing that I found, and I have a drone, I use drones when I talk to filmmakers in particular, and talked to one this week. And one of the things she told me was that if she had to peg anything that's really impacted her filmmaking, that she would highly recommend that every filmmaker have, is you've got to have a drone and a qualified drone operator. And obviously they're much more tightly controlled, so we all know that these days. But here are the things we can potentially use drones for. The interesting thing is, while delivering of products might be pretty sexy using a drone, we predict and anticipate that that'll be a very, very small portion of the drone market going forward. And we'll be using drones for these other things, capturing live events, all sorts of hazardous things humans shouldn't go do, where there might be chemicals presence, or we might want to fly over a volcano to measure something when people are being evacuated, or if Notre Dame is burning in London, we may want to fly a drone to be able to better direct firefighters to and kind of maneuver them around potentially unsafe conditions. Obviously, drones have been used for a while in law enforcement, whether it's, bomb robots and drones to a variety of different things. Military operations, we hear about drone strikes all the time, and we'll look at some less lethal versions of that in a second. But in filmmaking, again, having a drone be able to go where we can't, and that could be simply in a remote location or from an angle where we as humans can't possibly stand, is pretty cool. So let's look at some examples of how that might work. But let's start with that whole concept of delivery, something that Amazon, again, pioneered. Again, a very small portion of what we're going to be seeing in the future probably will be handled in this way. But Amazon checked it out about 3 years ago in 2016.
Amazon is developing services to use drones to safely deliver packages to customers in 30 minutes or less. It's called Prime Air. We're starting a new private trial for customers for military on December 2nd. We completed our first delivery. Customers may choose from a selection of thousands of items tucked away in Prime Air fulfillment center located just over the horizon from their homes. We've been operating fulfillment centers for quite a while now. This one is unlike all the rest. These modest-looking buildings contain innovative Prime Air technology. Here's how it works. Moments after receiving an order, an electrically powered Amazon drone makes its way down an automated track and then rises into the sky with the customer's package on it. These drones are autonomous. From takeoff to landing and return, they operate completely on their own. Cruising quietly through automated fields, carrying packages up to 5 pounds, and guided by GPS. Our systems are designed to find the destination. Within 30 minutes of placing the order, the customer receives their package. For this initial trial, customers can choose from the latest tech gadgets to their dog's favorite biscuits. We will use the data gathered during this beta test and the feedback provided by customers to expand the private trial to more customers over time. We're starting with 2 customers now, and in the coming months, we'll offer participation to dozens of customers living within several miles of our UK facility, and then growing to hundreds more. After that, well, it'd be easy to say, the sky's the limit. But that's not exactly true anymore, is it?
Sorry, Brian, and again, I think whenever we're playing these these videos, relying on the audio to go through in terms of bandwidth limitations, apologize for that. But hopefully you got the gist of it. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to sort of skip through the whole concept of other types of drones, because for what most of us would use a drone for, and having used them a lot in the past to film things, I think we all know how that kind of works. So we don't necessarily need to see how they might be used in all sorts of other wacky applications in military and all that sort of stuff. So let me zip through that a second and kind of jump ahead to robotics, because this is an area that, like drones, a variety of different entertainment applications exist for these. And I wanted to start, though, when we talked about e-commerce earlier. I don't know if any of you have ever been in one of these, but I have, and it's pretty cool when we look at the way that our e-commerce orders are fulfilled these days. Watch this. I'm guessing this might be staticky, so I apologize, but just concentrate on the visual imagery for now. So as this rolls, let me just jump in there and say, one of the things you obviously notice is that things aren't bumping into each other because they're all talking to each other. Look in the top portion of your screen on the left, and you'll see something that's very unusual. You'll see something called a human. Kind of weird, huh? And look at this distribution facility floor. And you'll see that, yeah, there are a couple of people there. But by and large, this is fully automated. So when you're ordering something from Amazon, this is quite literally what's happening. So let me stop that for a second and tell you something different that applies directly to our industry. And I invite you to do some further research on this. You know, there's a guy that I hope that you'll look up. His name is Andy Robot. Andy Robot. You may have heard of him, especially if you're into show pro or, you know, live concert production and that kind of thing. He's becoming fairly well known. But take a look at him and definitely go to his YouTube channel, look at some videos, and you can do that later this evening. But for now, he's one of those guys where when animators were talking about how they can use better, make better use of high-resolution displays to animate content, then Andy Robot's one of those guys that says, well, wait a minute, why don't we just also animate the screens? So again, kind of cool, really interesting stuff. He has some segments, if you check out his YouTube channel, where he literally has these industrial robots playing instruments in a band. So they're playing guitars, they're playing drums, they're playing keyboards, and I mean literally playing those instruments and being a DJ and all that sort of stuff. So it's not synthesizers. It's literally playing music using robots, so you get the idea. But let's talk a little bit about just robots in filmmaking, because that's one of the places they're used the most.
Probably seen a dolly camera booth, something like that. Or maybe you've seen a sort of a slow pan and market shot. These are all pretty common. What else is more complicated? From that, you're going to need some of this stuff. What's up, guys? I'm David here, and welcome back to Dope Tech. This one we flew out to Portland, Oregon, home of Motorized Precision, to take a look at some robots, but not just any robots. These are what I would call cinema robots, and as someone that's into video at all, this is absolutely dope. So let me explain in the intro. There are all types of stabilizers and video tools and things like that to help tune and move the camera in a certain way. Actually, in most shots, you can kind of tell what type of device is being used. Like this shot, belly cam. This will be a steady cam. This is really a slider, and this is a crane. But you've probably seen some crazy shots made on YouTube or in music video somewhere. For a shot like this, the answer is Kira. Kira has been responsible for tons of shots in commercials, tech products, car videos, etc. Not even notice. These are shots that aren't CGI, but that are super precise and difficult that a human could never do with any tool that exists now. Hence the name Motorized Precision. And the level of Dope Tech is actually twofold. It's the hardware, the actual robots, and the studio, the software that controls these robots do. They can do a lot.
So let me stimulate your thoughts here for a second. You know, we're using industrial robots here, whether it's Andy Robot or the things you've just seen, to manipulate cameras, to manipulate things, and move a point of view very quickly and precisely. And if you look up one of the great things of Andy Robot's creations, was a segment on the Grammy Awards with Lady Gaga where he had her piano moving around and had a microphone presented right up to her lips. And as he pointed out, that could have been a career ender if he would have slammed that microphone through her face. Then that robot wouldn't have been, too funny. But nowadays, obviously, we can use these robots. Imagine a robot that works in automotive manufacturing, let's say, moving cars around, quite literally lifting pieces of cars, used in filmmaking, such that if a car needs to do a flip and roll and crash and burn in an action sequence, now we have the capability for that robot to grab that car, flip it, roll it, crash it without really crashing it. If we wanted to do take 2, 3, 5, 100, we can have that same sequence shot over and over again until we get it right. So that's the kind of weird stuff we're talking about. Now we're moving pretty quickly, and this is the last segment before we get to your questions as we look at virtual and augmented reality. I'm going to assume you know the difference, but I'll tell you very quickly. Virtual reality, we're using devices, these headsets, et cetera, to place ourselves in a completely virtual world. Augmented reality, we're using our current surroundings and we're introducing other elements to our surroundings. And then we have what's referred to these days as mixed reality, where it's sort of a combination between the two, and it kind of gets a little bit freaky. So let's start with virtual reality.
Like a lot of people in my generation, I grew up thinking that ping pong was just a cute little game you played at summer camp when it was raining out. Then, as a senior in high school, I met Vyacheslav Terzy, a Ukrainian foreign exchange student, and he educated us. While I won't say that I was ever great, because of Slav, my group of friends and I quickly leveled up and learned that table tennis was a capital S sport.
I don't know about you, still makes me a little bit nauseous. Here's another quick example. The interesting thing here, of course, and I'm sure you have all probably looked at VR content. You could do it on Google Cardboard or anything very spectacular in the Oculus Rifts of the world and beyond that. So various levels of sophistication that we can access. Some of it's expensive, some of it's really not. But let's look at the difference between what we just saw and augmented reality.
We see more and more of this. The augmented reality almost seems like a more interesting idea to me than the virtual reality. To add things to the real world that you can use, maybe productivity things, maybe not, maybe game things. I don't know, the Minecraft demo they did for HoloLens was pretty cool, but we're hearing rumors that involved actual artificial intelligence being added into the HoloLens 2.0. And so
you just heard him mention HoloLens, so let's take a look at what that means.
Today, I get to tell you something very special. It's something we've been looking forward to for many years. When we set out to build HoloLens 2, we wanted to create something that you didn't need to learn how to use. You should just know it. And we call this instinctual interaction. Let me show you. Now, as Alex mentioned, HoloLens 2 is very comfortable. It fits just like a hat. And the only thing that's even more effortless is how I'm automatically signed in. With Windows Hello and our authentication, the HoloLens 2 is actually signing me in as I put on my device. Now, not only does the HoloLens 2 recognize me, it also recognizes my hands. Look at this. Fully articulated hand tracking. And as I move my hands around, the HoloLens 2 is actually calibrating to my unique hand size. And of course, not only does the HoloLens 2 recognize me and my hands, it also recognizes the world. Welcome to my mixed reality home. This is the place where I have all the apps and content that I use every day. Let's check some of them out. Now, I've seen many people put on HoloLens for the first time, and the first thing people do when they put on the device is they reach out their hands and try to touch the holograms. And now, you can. Look at the way that the hologram is responding to my hand, almost inviting me to touch it. And in fact, I can just grab this corner to resize it. Or I can rotate it. Or move it. That's right. We are touching holograms. This is an app I've got called Spatial. Let me just put it right there. I've got another app here called Euphoria View. Now, it's a little big, so let me just use 2 hands here to make it smaller, and then rotate it so you can see. There we go. And then let me put it down here in your spatial, maybe make it smaller. Yeah, that's nice. All right, now let's switch gears and talk about a different kind of application. I've got a browser over there, but it's kind of far away, and I don't really want to walk over there, so let me just call it over with my voice. Follow me.
It's getting a little freaky now.
This is a browser that's running Microsoft Teams, which is a tool that we use back home to collaborate. Let me see what the team's been working on. Okay, it looks like they've got a surprise for me in the Playground app. I just have to say the words show surprise. All right, so let me just open up that start menu here, and then place the app, and then launch it.
So you get the idea. So where we're headed, we could sit here the rest of the evening, which we won't, looking at these kinds of examples. But here's a very interesting project that I particularly love that Steven Spielberg has been involved with. You've probably heard of him, where it's such an interesting project because it deals with Holocaust survivors and being able to capture their stories so that we will never lose those stories of what they experienced. And it looks something like this.
What happens when the last Holocaust survivor dies? Who will tell their story? And is there a way to be remembered forever?
Do you think you were brave during the Holocaust?
I don't look at it that way. I look at it as maybe being selfish because I wanted to live while everybody else around me was dying, was being killed.
The Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center in Chicago found a way to permanently preserve survivor stories in the world's first 3D interactive hologram exhibition. Much like Siri or Alexa, you can ask the hologram questions.
What is your message to us?
You people who don't know what they're going to do with their lives, my job is to insist, to instill in them that they have the ability to overcome all types of adversity. They believe in themselves and that they're willing to pay the price.
Aaron Elster was 10 when he survived the Holocaust in Poland. He escaped the ghetto and hid for almost 2 years in the attic of a Polish family. A woman named Mrs. Borski fed him soup and a slice of bread once a day. He didn't step out of the attic until the end of World War II.
Life, thousands of lives depend on that. The inability to wash, to brush your teeth, to change your clothes, they're there. It's all those. It was a very miserable, painful existence.
The idea came about because we had been
So you get the idea. I mean, this one to me is very poignant because what they do is they bring these people into an environment, hundreds and hundreds of cameras creating these holographic images and asking these individuals thousands, literally thousands of questions, so that when somebody steps up to a microphone and says, hey, you know, what kind of food did you eat when you were confined? They have an answer for that. And really very, very powerful, definitely augmented, definitely holographic, et cetera. And we can actually interact with that technology. Pretty cool stuff. So look it up. Again, in the interest of time, we're going to try to wrap it up here. Here's the way that I think we can use, you know, AR and VR going forward. Obviously, this is kind of a duh moment in terms of gaming, but the whole concept of having VR movie theaters, VR theme parks, really starting to catch on now, and you know, Disney's done this for years, Universal's done this for years already. But the more sophisticated the technology becomes, the more sophisticated that the connectivity becomes, the latency factors are removed. We'll be able to literally have that interactivity like you're really, really there, make it all the more realistic. In sports, we already have virtual gyms. Put on your headset and you're working out, but you're working out in a virtual environment. Maybe you see other people working out, so it's like you're actually in the gym, even though you're at your home. You know, Peloton, those of you that have seen those ads, cycling devices and now treadmill devices, they've had video screens where you're competing against other people. But if you're in a virtual environment, you'd be able to actually see that trek that you're cycling on, and you'd see the people around you actually cycling with you. So if you're going to do a Tour de France, you're actually there quite literally doing it with them in a virtual environment. You get the idea. Virtual travel tours, augmented reality, things that our company is experimenting with right now. Excuse me, if you're in a museum, you walk up to an exhibit, you know, AR appears automatically, that kind of thing in an app. And then the whole concept of having television programming where augmented reality can actually leave the screen and right into your living room. So if the monster's coming at you, it doesn't stop at your screen anymore, and it'll make it even more immersive and interactive. Whoops. This is my favorite thing that I think that augmented reality, virtual reality, and just emerging technologies in general can do, helping those people with disabilities. So
But
check
that's
this
not
out.
the way I see it. You can catch up with friends.
Ready?
You can capture a moment with your family.
One face, small face, focus lock.
And you can start the day bright and early. You can take a trip to somewhere new.
3 miles to the summit.
You can concentrate on every word of a story.
A bird began to sing. Jack opened his eyes.
You can take the long way home. Or edit a film like this one. When technology is designed for everyone, it lets anyone do what they love, including me.
So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Sadie Poulson, but pretty compelling story there. A lady with cerebral palsy that one would have thought that her dreams of being in the entertainment industry would never be materialized. But in addition to the fact that she's a Full Sail graduate, excuse me, I'm getting teared up here just watching it. The gentleman that created the technology that allows her to function fully as a film editor today and do great work was also a Full Sail graduate. So how cool is that? Here's what Sadie has to say about her challenges and how she has overcome them. So for me, if we look at how emerging technology is going to help us in any aspect of the entertainment industry, to me, this is clearly the most important. How we can take people like Sadie and help them, you know, achieve their dreams and be productive members of our society by doing things that, you know, most of us will never be able to do. And all we need to do is use those emerging technologies to remove those barriers. Pretty cool stuff. Now we've covered a lot of stuff. You know, here's my sage wisdom for all of you, and then we'll take some questions here that I think you can do relative to emerging technology and how it impacts your aspect of the industry. Is first to understand what technologies are available in your niche in terms of how they might impact you in terms of what you do. You can decide whether you take advantage of them or not, obviously budgetary limitations and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. You also then need to know what your competition is doing. If you have a film production company, audio production, music studio, whatever the case may be, your competitors have embraced these emerging technologies and they're using them effectively to save money, produce a higher quality product. You better be aware of what they're doing, because you'll be left behind if you don't. You don't want to be on the bleeding edge of technology. You want to be on the cutting edge of it. You might want to identify a current problem that these emerging technologies can solve and test the implementation of that, see how that works for you. The whole idea here, and I used to be a finance professor at Full Sail, some of you may have heard, the whole idea is you don't need to understand the complexities and the math behind it. You just need to ask yourself a simple question. Do the benefits of what you're proposing to do, whether it's robotics or drones or any other part of technology, artificial intelligence, do the benefits outweigh the cost? And if they do, you should do it. And if they don't, you should wait. You know, pretty simple to me. Again, you don't want to be on the bleeding edge. Cutting edge is a great place to be. And finally, to develop some strategic vendor relationships. If you look at what happened with Sadie and somebody being able to step in and say, gee, if somebody has cerebral palsy and I want to make them a more functioning individual, and in her case, she can't even speak, then I want to give her the ability with a very bright and totally vivid mind to be able to use those mental faculties to be able to accomplish things. And that's a pretty cool thing. So developing relationships that say, okay, I've got some technology, I can bring it to bear for my part of the industry, whether it's filmmaking, audio, whatever the case may be. And then we can then go together, vendor, and sell that to other people in our industry and hopefully make ourselves a whole bunch of money going forward. So we covered a lot of material in a short period of time, ran a little bit over, but let me stop here for a second and see what kind of questions some of you may have, and I'll watch for the chat and I'll try to answer them verbally. And again, all this is being recorded, and I think I already mentioned you can get the slides. So anybody have any questions?
Ram, while we're waiting on some questions to come in, a question came to mind as you were speaking and giving your summary at the very end, when you were talking about the cost of technology in terms of if it's worth it, then go ahead and do it. But if you can't afford the technology, then you may want to wait. With that in mind, the fact that emerging technologies change so quickly, do you see that that the prices or the cost involved, especially for smaller businesses, will come down in the future? Or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, the cost absolutely for almost every aspect of technology comes down very, very quickly. So the problem for all of us, if I'm competing with you and we're filmmakers, and I have a production company, you have a production company, and I take advantage of the technology and I spend a lot of money on it, but I can produce a very high quality product in much, much less time than you are, and I can crank out those various scenarios that you saw in the demonstration of robotics, for example. I can serve 10 customers in the time it may take you to serve one. Then I may see that, it'd be penny wise and pound foolish to say, I'm not going to make that investment in technology because I can still limp along, but my competitors are going to blow me, out of the box. And if somebody knows I can get a quicker turnaround on commercial production, as an example, then they're going to flock to those people that can do the quick turnaround, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, actually it does, because basically what I'm taking from what the information that you're giving is that keeping your ear to the pulse of what's going on within your industry is very important. So in other words, maintaining the research and maintaining yourself in that space where you know what's going on within your industry will guide you in terms of what direction you should go with technology and whether or not you should invest in it or not. That's sort of what I was getting from it.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And again, you're operating within your niche. You don't have to know everything about everything. Nobody does. So you need to know as much as you can possibly know about your specific field of study and what you do, and become a master at that. And if technology can help you get there, you need to employ it. And if it can't, then you need to continue to do what you're doing. But just be aware of what your competition is doing, because in terms of dealing with investors, as I do all the time, if you miss that opportunity to use technology to save money or improve the quality of your product, then your competitors are going to beat you. We can't afford to let that happen.
Okay, excellent. Let's see. Are there any questions, anybody? Are you guys good? Where are we at? Just taking the pulse of the room.
Okay, Brian, go for it. Waiting for Brian's question to. Can
yeah,
you do that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can unmute. Let's see
Hi,
here.
Brian. Here we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a lot easier to do this and all that type. Yes, I am totally fascinated with what I have seen in this video. Emerging technology is definitely wonderful, but it's not really a concern, but it's like anything other. If somebody invests all their money into something like this because it is something they need, and something goes wrong and everything just goes down, I mean, do they know enough to have a backup, or what do you do with all that big data? Is there a backup disk? Is there a backup power surge, or what is the backup? How am I going to protect my investment?
Yeah, it's a great question. We want to make sure there are redundancies. You know, our company, as I mentioned, deals in mobile apps, and we have a huge database, and we've got all these beacons out there deployed, and we're collecting all this data. So we're fully redundant. So if anything totally crashed, we've got a complete backup. And I would advocate that for all of you, just as you would on your, a laptop or PC or anything, making sure you already have a backup of it. But the bigger thing is, if you've got these works that you have created using whatever software applications or robotics or all these kind of things, make sure that you have protected that. The minute you create something, you have to basically stick it in a secured location so that only you can get to it in the event there is a crash. I mean, just tonight on this session, we already talked about bandwidth limitations. There are always going to be limitations of technology. There are always going to be times when things crash. And if your whole life and livelihood, God forbid, depend upon that technology, you better have it backed up. And it's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you too. All of a sudden you get a hard drive crash or something terrible and you go, oh my God, I forgot to do X. So you can't forget to do that. It's too big a risk anymore.
Well, do you think that there could be an automatic type situation when you're running any kind of emerging technology that there's an automatic backup? Because it seems like it would be complicated to download something that sophisticated.
Yeah, in many cases there are, and you already are using this. Those of you that are operating on MacBook Pros, as many of you are already, there are already redundancies and cloud backups and all sorts of things. I have mine backed up a variety of different ways because when I create a new product or service, I can't afford to rely on just the cloud. I can't definitely afford to rely on only my hardware. So I have to have it backed up everywhere I can possibly back it up. So that's what I do. Now you can consider that being paranoid, and it is paranoid until it actually happens. And then it's just being smart, and it's not expensive anymore to maintain those backups.
Gotcha.
Any other questions? Other questions?
Yes, I just wanted your opinion. You said earlier that a lot of people under 30 have grown up with technology. Sometimes they're so into technology, they don't know how to do it without it. So what's your opinion if for some reason their devices break down, but they weren't taught to do it without technology, and they're not learning the concepts because the devices are doing it themselves? I mean, what is your opinion about that?
Yeah, great example, and we could give you any number of analogies. The recent issues with aircraft, where the aircraft have become so sophisticated pilots are unable to control the aircraft, it results in catastrophic, things. So, what I would tell you is this: you need to be a master of your craft to make sure that you understand every aspect of it. And I would tell you this from personal experience: I was at Full Sail for 10 years, teaching students, being a program director, and we would meet with potential employers. This is directly answering your question in terms of the skill sets they're most looking for in graduates. And this is not just Full Sail graduates. This is graduates from any college or university. And what we asked was about the importance of technological expertise and the ability to really understand, the craft and understand the, what it is that you do, what makes you a subject matter expert in your field of study. And what they told us every single time and every single get together of all these industry professionals that are going to hire you guys is they said the one thing that's missing the most in college graduates today are things like interpersonal skills, the ability to take the information that you have learned, whether it's on a hard drive somewhere, to be able to explain it, express it, describe it, use it, and explain how it's going to benefit a potential customer, then that's where you should concentrate your efforts. The technology can do all the processing stuff behind the scenes, but you're never going to sign a $50 million film deal with a tweet. You're only going to do that by showing up in somebody's office, showing the technology you have, showing why it's important to end users, in this case customers, viewers, to be able to get that deal, look somebody in the face and shake their hand. And to the extent that you can, in addition to all the computer backups, have those skills, those are the ones that are going to serve you the best going forward, guaranteed.
Excellent. I appreciate that. I just wanted to hear it from somebody in your type of field and your type of position. I take the same thought, and that's what I thought too, that employers look at.
Right.
I'm a music business major, so technology would be great for me. So, but because I'm an older student, I know how it is not using technology. So putting both together, knowing the new stuff and having experience with the old stuff and mixing them, I would be able to explain and show both.
Yeah, and what I would tell you all, and again, as we wrap this up, and I appreciate the spirit of your questions, the one thing that I would tell my former students, and the beauty of an educator, being an educator in the past, is you get that rush a couple of times when a student looks you in the eye and you could tell that they get it, that it's something clicked with them. That's really, really cool. But what's also cool is when you get the calls years later, and I've been out of Full Sail for 3 years now, I still get calls from graduates saying, hey, you told me this in your class, and now I have the ability to apply this, and here's how I did it. You don't need to be able to answer every question in the world. You don't. You just need to understand how it all works. And if you understand how it all works, how it fits together, how you can use technology to do what it is that you want to accomplish, and you can go out and explain that to somebody, then you'll definitely, absolutely have a successful career. How cool is that, doing what you love doing? Well, I want to thank everybody. I really appreciate the time we spent together. I want to thank you, but I also want to remind you, if you would like to get the slides, and I know Kenneth's going to make the archive available of the session that's been recorded, just send me an email, ron@districts.com, subject slides, and you'll get the slides. But thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Ron, I believe that Sharon also has a question. Sharon, is that correct?
Sorry about that.
Okay, I see you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hello, Ryan Cook. Yes, Sharon Johnson. I just wanted to make a great comment as well. Just like Brian said, I'm old school as well. So for me, I combine the now, the future, and I still do the things from the past. Even for online here, I have my folders for each course, each class. I have to do that. I'm more personal. And, I have to have that, combine it into what I do in anything. I look at the future with these robots. And I'm saying, okay, where are all the humans at? There's a few humans and a lot of robots. So where does the individual humans go far as the robots in that area that's taking, are they taking the jobs or they're relocating the humans to another position?
Yeah,
I
they're
always
gonna
wondered about that.
they're gonna put the humans sharing on a different planet. Just kidding. No, in all seriousness, what is happening is, which I think is a beautiful thing and a little bit scary thing. I totally agree. I understand the spirit of your question. What we want to be, we're in charge. You know, whether you're using that, you know, that whole where we're educating those machines. There's certain things that those machines will never be able to do. They're becoming more realistic, all those kind of things. We all know all that sort of stuff. The creative side is what we need to be able to do. What we want to use the technology to do is to do the mundane, to do the repetitive, to do the time consuming, to do the processing, to free us up to use our intellect and our imagination to create things for the future. That's what we do. What humans do is two things. We use the creative side, but we're also on the consumption side. So the way I look at it, especially in the entertainment industry, we use all the bells and whistles we can bring to bear to create content which is captivating and immersive and engaging. And then we want to go out there and present that to a human audience, because machines are never going to feel and love and experience emotion and the things that we evoke through music, through film, through computer animation, through gaming, all those kind of things. If we use the machines to do the heavy lifting in the background, then our job is to do the fun stuff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Sure. Anything
This
else?
is very exciting.
Nope, I think that's it. I just want to remind everybody that the archive that I have done this evening, I'll be assembling that and emailing that link out to everybody who was on the registration list. So if you're here, you'll be getting a copy, as well as those of you that were unable to make it. And I wanted to thank you so much, Ron, for your time this evening and providing us with all this amazing information. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to be with you folks. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right. Well, you have a wonderful night, Ron.
You too.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.